The stat is 1% of New Zealand left, basically, for Australia. So they're not wrong. They are thinking that people aren't stupid. They are people who are good people but want a strong economic future. They want a better standard of living.
And what would that mean for New Zealand?
Workers increasingly continue and increase that trajectory to Australia and beyond. Best and brightest. Your decent worker move to Australia and increasingly they become Australian. Even for the elite, CEO of one of our biggest listed companies who was foreigner and has gone back to the country they came from.
What about everyday New Zealanders, what they're worried about? What is occupying their headspace right now?
It's survival. It's very tough. We're having mince, not steak.
Simon Bridges, he's the former Energy Minister, former leader of the National Party and the opposition. He's now CEO of the Auckland Business Chamber and the chair of the Auckland Transport Agency. So what you're saying is, in order for New Zealand to become a better place to live, we need to have... If we don't tackle these top three things, what would happen to New Zealand?
I think it's very simple. In the end,
It's 2026. We've just kicked off the year and we're all come back fresh. Do you think that the life in New Zealand, does it feel like it's getting easier or does it feel like it's getting harder for most New Zealanders?
I think for a lot of New Zealanders, it feel like it's getting harder. I think it's been a tough period. I mean, in a way, if you want to be really deep and meaningful, New Zealand has had a very strong economic history. In the sort of the post World War II period, it was strong. It was one of the wealthiest, in the top 4 or 5 countries in the world. People had a very strong standard of living. And then at a high level, what happened was Britain joined the EU, so we can no longer exactly be Britain's farm, which was making us rich. And we've kind of, I don't want to say struggled, but we've had difficulty economically since then. A few good things have happened. People will argue about what they mean geopolitically, but we signed a big free trade agreement with China. It's meant, and we've moved into Asia, where we are geographically, albeit at the edge, and that's been economically a pretty good story. But coming right forward, since COVID, I think it's been a tough economic malaise, really, and so if you're you're just a regular family, you're a small and medium-sized business, there's lots of different stories, but as a generalisation, I think it's been hard. We know last year in 2025, I think that the stat is 1% of New Zealand left. I think basically for Australia, right? And so they're not wrong. They are thinking, but people aren't stupid. And as a collective, as if you look at the trend, they are people who are, are good people, but want a strong economic future. They want a better standard of living, and it's all relative, right? I mean, you can be the worst soccer team, you can be hopeless, your goalie can't catch, your strikers can't kick very well, but if the other team is worse, you will win the game. And so I'm just saying to you, there we are next to Australia. I think just objectively, Australia is a stronger, wealthier, higher standard of living country. And so, is it getting tougher? I think it has been tough. I'm not doom and gloom, by the way. I think there are a bunch of things that are quite exciting for New Zealand in 2026 and beyond. We could be coming into quite an exciting period. But it's been very tough.
What about everyday New Zealanders in terms of what they're worried about? What are they concerned about? What is occupying their headspace right now in the moment?
I think it's, for many, not all, obviously, it's survival. It's just a sense of, it's very tough. We're having mince, not steak. We're maybe, eating less of this. We've got a power bill, turn those lights out, don't have the heater on. I mean, not at the moment as we record this, it's summer, but, not a really warm summer to be fair. So I think that just kind of day to day, the average Kiwi doesn't have much money in the bank. And one kind of definition of poverty is like, do you have enough to... If a crisis came, if you crashed your car or someone crashed into you and suddenly you had to pay $5,000 to get that fixed, could you do that? Well, most Kiwis couldn't. And so I think that economic survival, it's a personal example, and maybe it's a bad one to give, but, I think about, our oldest son, he's really enjoying rowing at his school. Well, to be part of that rowing team costs a few $1,000s. And so surprise.
Sports is really expensive as well.
So surprise, the people who turn up to rowing, the
quite
parents,
affluent, right?
They are affluent. They have nicer cars.
Nice cars and nice houses by the beach.
And so most Kiwis are sitting there, we're thinking about these sort of things. Can we do that? Well, I don't know. We can afford it. What are we, not what are we eating tonight? I'm not saying we have, as a generalisation, there can be that kind of poverty. We're not saying that's the usual experience. But, week to week, how am I paying? It's that survival mode rather than kind of planning ahead to kind of bigger, more exciting things. And I think that's the prevalent sentiment, yeah.
What are do you think the fundamental issues that could be improved in New Zealand right now with a simple decision, but they're not being made by whoever is supposed to be?
How long have you got?
I know, right?
I could really give you a crazy ramble on this.
I need top 3 though.
I think what is true in business and politics is we sometimes lack just really clear, robust thinking. So much is circumstantial, responding to that's happened today, and that was what we actually need is leadership. That's about kind of, hey, I'm really clear about where we're going in the future and what we're going to do to get there.
Yeah.
I think in terms of strategy at a government level and a business level, I'd almost rather the wrong strategy than no strategy. I think wrong decisions executed well with conviction can do good. At a level, they might be suboptimal. They might not be what I'd choose. And so, if we're talking about just some specifics, and there'd be others we could think about. But if we think about some specifics that I've done a bit of thinking about, and I've been New Zealand's energy minister. I mean, one would be if we're talking cost of living and that issue of survival. I think some very clear reforms in the energy system. To over time see much more supply of energy in New Zealand, and therefore in supply and demand terms cheaper energy for consumers, households, and for businesses. I think that's a really important area, like quite close to the top of economic issues for New Zealand. Donald Trump may be wrong about lots of things. He may be right about some of them. I think he's definitely right at a high level about energy, which is that countries that are powerful in energy are stronger, wealthier, and more powerful geopolitically. And there's no excuse for us not to be strong in that area. That's one area. I think just continuous regulatory and tax reform. I think not everyone agrees, but in the end, for our companies, having lower tax does incentivize a higher growth, more exciting a business environment and country and higher standards of living over time. Lots of people sit there and say we can't afford that. We need to worry about the government books. Look, there's a validity in that at a level, but I think we can lose the woods for the trees. Government is a small part. We need to think about the economy and what will get that growing, and a lower tax environment for business is part of that. I think a third one for Auckland, but it's Auckland in the end is over a third of New Zealand, is around technology and business, and a part of it's easy to say these things, but if we've got Rocket Lab, Xero, Fisher and Paykel Healthcare, how do we have a few more of those really big companies in tech, which is probably our second or third biggest sector as a generalisation today? How do we have more of them? Because they're the companies that mean more Kiwis stay here, because they'll be earning more, they'll have a better standard of living, and there are government policies that could encourage that in a much stronger way as well. So there's three things for you.
So what you're saying is, in order for New Zealand to become a better place to live, we need to have big companies that could employ lots of people. We need to have good, cheap powered energy.
I think that's definitely. I mean,
less tax.
I think put those two or three things together. what do you need to have strong technology and a high knowledge economy? Well, it's AI is where this is all going. We could talk about AI. There's lots about it that worries me. I think if you're not worried at some level, you haven't been thinking or reading, right? And but in the end, look, it's inevitable as we move into what does AI need? AI need lots of data. What does data need? Data needs lots of energy, right? I mean, if we want data centers, we need a much more abundant source of preferably renewable, but frankly, any kind of energy. So energy is very important across those various things. And then if you get your incentives and right, look, businesses have choices. We've grown Rocket Lab in New Zealand. Are we going to stay here? Or are we going to actually basically do it in America because their tax regime is so much more attractive? By the way, Rocket Lab, we just take that example, that has created, I think according to Sir Peter Beck, over 150 millionaires just within that company. And I'm not saying that it's not all about wealth. I'm just saying that is, over 150 families that are better off, that have options, that have a better standard of living for themselves and their kids and their grandkids and so on. So that's what we want, isn't it? And that's why, as a generalisation, there are small niche companies doing really well, but as a generalisation, bigger companies and technology mean higher paid jobs. People who can stay here have a better standard of living in this country. And that benefits you and I. As a business association chief, I've got better members with more ability to sponsor things and do stuff and pay my staff better. For you as a business person and journalist and podcaster, it means, you've got better opportunities for guests and sponsorship. I mean, whether you're a restaurateur, it means you've got someone in the restaurant, buying the lobster that they couldn't otherwise afford. It's a beneficial circle, if you like.
If we don't tackle these top three things, the energy, the tax, and employment, if you were saying, or even opportunities, what would happen to New Zealand?
I think that's a great question. I don't want to be pessimistic. It's interesting. On the way here, I'm listening to a variety of things, actually, the last 2 or 3 days, but on the drive to see you around a debate, is Britain broken? Right, and I've just been in Britain with my wife, who's from the UK originally. It's got a lot of problems. Actually, it made me much more positive about New Zealand. I can be a bit negative, right? I think there's many things about New Zealand that. So I'm not that doom and gloom about New Zealand. But in the end, do we want to be complacent? People kind of say, it's a great lifestyle, but actually you can't earn money here, and you'll have fewer kind of economic options. Or should we really try to have a bit of all of that and be less complacent and have a more exciting, dynamic economy, and therefore I think lifestyles and living standards. So there's a choice there. It's not all about the policies I've mentioned to you, and I didn't go into the detail of them. It'd be boring if someone wants a longer conversation with me about energy policy and what we can do. Happy to do that. I haven't got into the policies. I think even without strong policies, at a high level, New Zealand's got some things going for it. What are the world's biggest 3 issues at the moment? I would say they are geopolitics, the rules of the game in the past, sort of rule of law, multilateral kind of norms. It's all broken down. It's now power power politics is back. It's AI. It's climate change and some of the issues around that, and we see that in New Zealand with more flooding and various kind of weather changes. So they are the big issues. If you think about that, and particularly those first couple, but certainly the geopolitics. Hey, the Northern Hemisphere. If you're in Europe, and I was in France and Poland over the Christmas New Year period, they've got a lot of problems. They've got war on their doorstep. It might be coming to them. That's what many Europeans believe. So at a high level in 2026 beyond, if you think about New Zealand, our critical disadvantage, which is, the most remote, smallest developed country in the world, far away from anywhere, I think becomes a critical strategic advantage. Not through any skill. We've done nothing in relation to that. We can't pick up New Zealand and move it closer to market. It's just what. But we are a long way I suppose, just to put this simply, from Northern Hemisphere problems. And so, actually, if you're a high net worth Silicon Valley guy, sorry, they mostly are guys, but guy or girl, if you're a European high net worth or a Singaporean high net worth, actually the arguments for New Zealand and having a passport, and then over time investing in the next zero or so on, because that's your expertise and you can do that, they're pretty strong. And I think that will work in our favour this year, next year and beyond, and be quite a strong mega factor. I think slowly but surely, just cyclically, you can argue about what the government's done, whether they've helped this along or not, but just on economic cycles, New Zealand's in for a better phase, I think, in the next 5 years. I think the second half of the 2020s, almost by definition, has to be better than the first half, with the big caveat of geopolitics, really, and what happens in the world. If war happens, or at a significant level, there's many wars going on, but something that is more substantive in an economic sense, that could change it. There are lots of things but I think so geopolitically, economically, I reckon New Zealand's in for a better patch. But imagine that better patch with stronger, more effective policies. It could be really strong.
Well, if you don't have the strong, effective policies, like as I asked earlier, what is it going to look like? If you can paint me a picture of 2026 coming and passing, nothing improves in regard, and we've got elections this year, and I understand, nothing improves in the sense of energy. It's as expensive. I know this is the doom and gloom, but I actually want to understand the trajectory of where we're heading if we don't do, if not we, but if the right people aren't making the decisions to improve the rating and bring the 1% back. Because
I think it's simple. I think it's very simple. In the end, we womble along and we cement our place as an increasingly bottom of the pack, lower income first world country. So in the OECD, where we've basically trended to the back, we just lock that in. And actually, as I say, some good things will happen, but you know what?
But what would that mean for the average person?
This is what it means.
And the business owner? This
is what it means. Workers increasingly continue and increase that trajectory to Australia and beyond.
And what would that mean for New Zealand?
Your I don't want to say best and brightest. Actually, I think they're slight, but your decent worker who wants to get up and do well and kind of have a 3-bedroom home with a pool. They're not after being a multi-millionaire, but they move to Australia and increasingly they become Australians, right? So that long trend, which has always been there, that really locks in and exacerbates. But even for the elite, right? Because, someone once said to me, a CEO of one of our biggest listed companies, who was a foreigner and has gone back to the country they came from, but they were here, they love New Zealand. They said, you know what, for a small handful of hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders, this is the best place in the world. If you're at a level where you haven't got a mortgage, you've got a batch, you're earning good money, hey, New Zealand is amazing. But I tell you what,
I agree. Yeah, but most people don't.
But most people aren't in that reality, right? I fully accept that. Fully accept that.
Yeah.
But even for those people, if you want to call them the elite, the best, the top, I don't know, what is that? Is it 250,000? Is it 400,000 people? Even for them, here's what's going to get locked in. Your children move offshore, and they never come back. And so you are visiting your grandchildren in Australia, or worse, because it's longer away and you'll be able to do it less or fewer times, the Northern Hemisphere. And of course, just to digress for a second, but just to add an illustration to that. I mean, what do we see amongst the elite in Auckland, certainly, but I think probably in your Wellingtons and your Christchurches now. In my day, I've got a master's from Oxford. I'm proud of that. So it was a great thing. Met my wife there, had a great time. But it was unthinkable for me. Everyone still, what am I? I'll be 50 this year. Everyone's still in my day. We did our undergraduate in New Zealand. But increasingly what happens is elites' children do their undergraduate offshore. They go straight from, King's College or Auckland Grammar or Westlake boys or girls or whatever it is. They go straight to Sydney University, Harvard University, or what have you. And here's the thing about that. If their undergraduate degree is overseas, factually, on the numbers, they ain't never coming back, right? Because their girlfriend or boyfriend will be overseas.
Their work is going to be there.
Their work will be there. Their formative, everything. So
community that is, and everything.
So that's what we're playing for here. Better policies and so on. I think it doesn't need to be that story. It can be a much more exciting story for New Zealand, where it's always going to be a good country. It's always going to have its pros and its cons and its things going for it. But I think I said earlier, that more exciting, dynamic, stronger economy. That means more of our workers, whether it's trades, whether it's,
that was going to have an impact on
and our elites and their children get to stay here as well.
But also there's be an impact on businesses. And we will get into the part about what do you see as the CEO of the Auckland Business Chamber? What do you see business owners suffering from and worried about? And they're not going to have the talent that they need to function properly. And if they don't have that, that's going to be stressful. I wanted to paint the picture for the listener, the average listener, who doesn't understand the potential future implications of if we don't sort out the key levers that you have mentioned that are going to help us to have a better place to live. And you've mentioned heaps of things. We will get to energy and AI and the geopolitics. I want to get into the cost of living in a bit. But before we do that, how do you think AI has been adopted in New Zealand so far?
I'm first to say I'm not a technologist. But that said, I spend a lot of time
speaking to people,
speaking to business people in this area. And I do read a lot, over summer I read a book by Mustafa Suleyman on AI. Mm-hmm. He's one of the key founders really in this area. And look, other key founders, they are worried. And we might get to that. But to answer your question, I would suggest to date in business in New Zealand and in government, actually, and in other wider non-government organisations, whether it's sort of universities or not-for-profits, or really it's still in a hype phase. People talk about it. Maybe they're mucking around on ChatGPT or some other, and then it's helping them to pretend they've written a great essay at university, or they've come up with a good marketing plan or whatever. And then there's that sort of peripheral stuff, but they're not really gripping it and making the most of it, and it's not transformative in their, as I say, businesses or government or what have you. There are exceptions. If you're a big tech company, if you're a big telco, if you're really sophisticated and 1,000 plus or a few hundred plus employees, you may be really getting efficiencies. You may have gone from into much more automated call centers and chatbots and generative AI and what have you. But that's not that's the exception rather than the rule today. Now, all of that said, I'm sure it's going to get there. I think I can't tell you, is it 4 years, 6 years, 7 years? Maybe there's an AI crash before that when these massively overpriced businesses at some level come down from that and correct, and that could have global ramifications and cause global economic problems. But in the medium to long term, hey, look, this is going to be unbelievable. It is going to be transformative. It's the next, we've gone from whatever it is, Stone Age to Middle Age to Industrial Age. I mean, this is absolutely, going to be millennia defining. But we're not there yet. We're certainly not there in New Zealand.
Where are we at with the rest of the world? If you think about the top countries who are doing really well with adoption and AI and they're flourishing, but do you have any thoughts on who's actually doing well?
Oh, well, I mean, we're in superpower competition, aren't we? I mean, you use stronger words than that, but really the leaders in technology and AI are the United States and China. And, I could give you reckons around all of that, but it's they're probably, as much as anything I say, they would be reckons that would make a fool out of me, because so much is happening and changing, and in the end, who can? I don't think any one person can be over everything that's happening in these superpowers in this area. All I think I would say is it's very competitive. I think anyone who says, "Oh, well, that one's going to win it," hands down, because Silicon Valley's amazing, it's the best, that's a simplistic view of life. Anyone who says China's going to win it, and you're going to bet against America and the power of that kind of economic innovation that comes from here, that's got its issues as well. They both got great strengths, and that's a superpower competition. There's other niches. I mean, if you go to Israel on cybersecurity, if you go to the UK and London, it has niche expertises. Other parts of Europe and look, even in this part of the world, there'll be niches we can play in. But I think, at a high level, the big two are the US and China, and superpower competition is being played out in the field of technology, and more specifically AI.
All right, you guys, I want to tell you about one resource that I look into and check all the time. It's helped me in my own business journey, and it's made me a better business owner, a better podcaster, helped me stay on top of all the business news that are happening in New Zealand. It's called NZBusiness Magazine. It's one of the New Zealand's oldest and most trusted sources for business stories, insights, and analysis for SME owners and leaders. So we've partnered together to help bring these kind of conversations like this one to more Kiwi entrepreneurs across New Zealand. So if you want to stay on top of what's happening in business, visit nzbusiness.co.nz today. Hello, thanks for watching this video. Quick note, have you subscribed? Over 90% of people who are watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or on Apple are not subscribed or following. Please do so now. It's so simple. The button will be around the screen somewhere. You either hit subscribe or hit the follow button or leave me a review. It will help me so much, helps me grow as a channel and support my work. So I really appreciate it. Okay, back to the episode. What's the message for you to New Zealand business owners who are not quite adapting to AI at the moment?
Might not be the message you'd expect. I mean, I think the kind of glib, superficial, easy answer would be, you need to get in and try this out, and in
terms of efficiency and productivity as well, and like prosperity. Right?
Yes, but here's my view would be more nuanced, and what I just said is, what you might expect me to say, which is get into this. You need to. You'll be left behind. I don't. I think the actual answer is it depends a bit on your business. If you're a really big business, you'll already, because you're sophisticated and you can get the best people, be in on this and be transforming areas of your business to find efficiencies and serve your customer better and make more money, frankly. But if you are a smaller business, I'd suggest as a generalisation, you could throw a lot of money at this, and that might be fun, but you might not get the outcome. So I'd be very outcome focused. And I personally think, if I think about the Chamber of Commerce in Auckland, we're an SME, we've got about 80 staff. I want to see what others are doing, learn from their experiences before I rush in and spend $700,000 for limited outcomes. So I think we're still in that stage of you could spend a lot without getting the use case for it. Watching others and learning, and being a fast follower rather than the leader in this area is maybe actually better advice for an SME. But I'm generalising hugely. and there'll be exceptions to that, who are doing amazing things and getting outcomes and transforming their business.
I know that you talked about the three levers, energy, tax, and employment. And I really wanted to get into that. I wonder if this is a good time to understand what is really driving power bill really high in simple terms so that someone understands, like, why is energy such a problem?
Gosh, it's I'm just sitting here fearful of some expert coming and critique me. But I think, look at a really, really high level. I come to that Trumpian point I made. We need more supply, is my view. More supply and more competition. And that they would be a virtuous circle. More competition would mean more supply, and vice versa. At the moment, my personal view, which doesn't win me fans amongst our biggest listed companies who are gentailers, but our gentailer model, it's not their fault. They're doing absolutely nothing wrong. They are operating to the letter of the law and following the incentives that a government set of rules and laws has put in place for them. So this is really aimed at government, politics, not at them. But that gentailer model is not right. When you have a big company that is both the generation and the retail, that puts in place all sorts of incentives and disincentives not to create enough power and competition. Because you've got such concentration amongst those companies that why would they want to see more solar generation? Because actually all that means, it could mean more competition, and it means lowering prices. And they make more money if they're at the sweet spot of just enough energy in any given year. Or cynics might argue, not quite enough, right? Because that allows them to make higher profits. And so I think that model of generation and supply together in a very small handful of companies, over 90% of our market, that needs to be separated and changed. That would be very powerful in ensuring that the solar providers I talk to who want to have new solar farms, that they would be able to get ahead. At the moment, that's all controlled by, or not all, that's sweeping, but that gentailers have real control over that. And then more supply, of course, and just basic fourth form economics, school economics, more supply will mean lower a price. There are other issues. Look, the gas ban didn't help from the Ardern government. We're running out of gas.
If someone who doesn't understand or doesn't I don't know what the gas ban is. Sorry, if you can tell me.
Well, this is going back to the Jacinda Ardern government. They decided to stop all new exploration and permitting for new oil and gas supply, exploration and supply, and the problem with that is, that's there's many problems, but fundamentally, we are seeing not just as a result of this. To be fair, it's hard to find the gas anyway, right, in New Zealand. But you put all that together, we're running out of gas, and our big industries, they often need that gas, and so we are seeing actually not that slowly, a deindustrialisation at a level in New Zealand, which is also bad, because I think big powerful countries understand, and it's true in New Zealand as well, that hey, good economies need everything. They need industry, they need tech, they need tourism. To digress, slightly, some people say, well, tourism's a low wage kind of not worth having sort of a sector. Well, this is complete nonsense. I mean, America, the wealthiest economy in the world, has a booming tourism sector, right? I mean, actually, they've done a few things not to help themselves in recent time. France, a wealthy country, does. Singapore, which is has a double the GDP per capita than New Zealand does. It works hard on its tourism sector, right? So we want tourism, but we want it all, right? We want industry. We want aluminium produced down at the bottom of the South Island. We want Methanex. We want a steel mill south of Auckland. We don't want to see those shut. We want paper mills. They're good for an economy. But we're seeing those phase out because we haven't got the energy and the gas that we require.
So we need more competition. We need more energy providers, and that is the biggest problem. And I mean, at some point you were the energy minister, and why or what do you wish you had done before you had not stopped being the energy minister and gone out of politics? And how hard is it to get in more supplies?
I suppose back then, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm making excuses, but I was minister. Can't remember the years, but let's say it was 2012, 13, 14, something like that. Maybe it's anyway. It was a different world.
Why?
Things seemed simpler. We actually had a market that was working very well on the numbers. It was, tracking up in terms of renewables. Price seemed under control, and if anything, going in the right direction, and we had increased supply. I think a few things have happened, and this would be the defence the gentailers would make, right? There was the gas ban. There was a lot of uncertainty. There was COVID. The technologies have changed hugely. Solar and wind have come up. Not from nowhere, but to be much more competitive, disrupting everything. Power use and demand has gone up significantly again for a bunch of reasons.
But don't people know that, because there's an extrapolation, and then whoever is in government and advisory can actually look into the future and say we're going to be needing more of that. Therefore, there's more demand. If there's less supply, it's going to go up. So we need to act now and actually introduce new supplies.
I don't think we had that picture in, say, 2014.
Really?
A bit over it.
That's fascinating to know, though.
Huge. I mean, you think about what's changed in the world in that time and in energy.
Yeah.
But I think, we just, again, come back to it, and you think about it today. I think what the gentailers say, hey, look, be patient. We've got more supply coming. My point is, it's nowhere enough for where we're going to need to be then if we want to sort of be strong in AI and have data centres. And so, what I'm proposing to you today is would be bad for an electricity sector at a level. They'd make less profit, but it would be great for New Zealand's economy because we'd have a cheaper, more abundant energy system.
Because in Australia, I'm sure they have many suppliers, right? There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of people too, but there's a lot of competition. I'm sure they're still doing well, right?
Australia's far from perfect. They've got plenty of problems too, but in the end, it strikes me at a very high level. They still have very significant non-renewable resources, and they're able to, because they're not as strong in renewables. We've got these big lakes that we've had hydropower from. We've got geothermal. They've been able to leapfrog and things like solar. These very and to a point where they're not just an exporter and making shed loads of money from non-renewable energy, LNG and so on. They send off in big ships, but also in renewables now. I mean, I don't know exactly as I talk to you where it's at, but they are exporting solar energy power to Singapore and making great money out of that. Well, New Zealand should be a renewable superpower. We have all the conditions for this, and yet we've kind of, through whatever it is. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's soft thinking. When I was the minister, I don't know. But all of that means we're not where we could or should be, and we're picking on energy. I've given you 3 things from the top of my head. There'd be 7 other things we could do as a country, but they are important ones, and energy is definitely an important part of it.
So, what do you think needs to happen right now to have competition and have lower prices? Simple terms.
In energy, I think it's a raft of smaller reforms, but I do think the big, in quotes, radical one is gentailer separation, whether by some kind of, I don't know if we call them Chinese walls anymore, but Chinese walls between the generation retail businesses, or whether it's a fuller, more structural separation. I think that's government. Government understands the problem, but I don't think it's been bold enough in its answers in this area.
The other part was the tax that you mentioned as the lever. It is such a big topic and it's quite political, and I'm not really interested in getting into it because that's not the focus of the podcast. It will make businesses flourish if there's less tax to pay. We obviously don't want to be as well. We would love to be as amazing as Dubai with this tax-free, and they're very rich and they can afford it. For us, we can't. But what are the chances of that anything happening to the tax levels in 2026, especially with the election coming up?
Yeah, well, let's put us to one side, the politics. Because, believe it or not, I'm actually not that interested in that either. I just think let's just deal with the economics of it. Now, there is a critique that's a bit different from where I'm at, which is that, hey, we're spending too much in terms of our government, and they need to really pull that back. And actually, if anything, they can't decrease tax because that'll cost money and they won't have enough to, and the debt will increase, public debt, the government's debt, it's like a business in a sense, and that's no good. I have some sympathy for that in as much as I don't want to see government wasting money. We need to pull that back. But I do think they lose, the people who argue this lose the wood for the trees. Yes, I want a careful government, but actually there's a bigger picture which isn't just the government's books and how the government's going. It's our wider economy. And it's actually the wider economy that matters most if we want to keep our kids and grandkids here and all the stuff we were talking about before about Australia and so on. And so I sit there and say, yes, be careful with the government's books, but I tell you what, tax really matters. It incentivises or disincentivises business. Britain's having a terrible time right now because their Labour government's put it up. Businesses are leaving in droves. High net worths are leaving in droves. That's at an extreme, but that's a terrible thing. It's very competitive in the world, right? You mentioned Dubai. We could mention 30 other countries. I talk with people from overseas. When they look at the details of New Zealand, they like the idea for the reason I said. Safe haven. They come down here. They're a long way from Ukraine and various problems, but it's actually really high, a pretty high tax regime. You'll get 39 cents in the dollar as an individual above a certain income, and then you'll be paying I show my is it 28 or 29 cents as a company, right? So you're double whammied kind of whatever you do. So I think there's a very strong argument to be more competitive in that area if we'd attract more business, have more growth. I'm not this is called supply side economics. It's had a bad name in recent years. I accept that there are flaws in that argument level, but more growth does of course mean more tax and more taxpayers. If a business is making billions as opposed to hundreds of millions or hundreds of millions as opposed to tens of millions, they will overall be paying more tax, and that's what you get with growth. And I think at a level, I wouldn't take this too far, but a level lower corporate tax rate. So I think there's a very strong argument, even if in the short term there's some arguments against that, which is getting the government's books under control.
And do you think the attraction of more businesses, bigger companies, where there's better employment, is that going to make it more attractive for the government to lower tax?
It's chicken and egg, isn't it? It's chicken and egg. I think. Big business. Do we mean big businesses from overseas? A Google or something coming in and basing their R&D stuff here. Well, hey, that'd be great. I'd have that. And we want to make sure they do pay some tax here in New Zealand, by the way. But also, as important, probably more important, and I think more New Zealanders would like this more, is seeing the $100 million New Zealand technology company become $1 billion New Zealand technology company. And
how can they do that?
Again, how long do you mean? That's a big question, but tax is part of the answer.
Exactly.
Tax is part of the answer. I mean, you and I know, don't we? And I think listeners know, if your tax is lower, the more you as you do better, that does incentivize you to do more. At a high rate, it's kind of like, as it was, and look, I talk with business every day who are structuring their things in intricate ways based in Singapore and so on, where the regime is much lower, and surprise for that reason, and plenty of others, but they have a much stronger high GDP economy. So I think tax is part of the answer. That's not necessarily a fashionable view. Your corporates out there will say, "Oh no, we're happy to pay tax," but they're virtue signalling, frankly, when they say that, and good for them.
And what are the business owners now signalling, that the ones that you're talking to on a daily basis, are they wanting less tax? Or is it something that they really want right now? Or is they're like, actually, there's worse things that are happening right now?
I think if you ask them, and it's a struggling SME, they'd absolutely say yes. I mean, but many business in New Zealand, it's a generalisation. I mean, I think there's three business sectors at a level in New Zealand. You've got corporate New Zealand. Let's be clear, though, corporate New Zealand is smaller and weaker than most places, right? I mean, even Australia across the ditch, just because it's a bigger economy, it has much bigger corporate scene, which means lots more lawyers and accountants feeding off it and other consultants doing well, and that's fantastic, right? And it's the ecosystem is so much bigger and stronger. Here, if you're being really cynical, and it's not entirely true and it's not entirely fair, but you'd say you've got some Aussie-owned banks and finance companies, you've got some co-ops, and you've got some former SOEs, state-owned enterprises, and there's not much else. That's not entirely fair, but, so it's a pretty thin scene. Lots of people focus on it. You have big business awards focused on it. Actually, it's not even the most dynamic part of the New Zealand business scene. You've got two other sectors. The SME sector. Individual businesses are not strong. Right, and often they're hand to mouth and they're struggling. Some are remarkable, but that's a sector. Collectively, though, it is strong, and that's where, at a level that the Auckland Business Chamber that I'm CEO of, where we play and what we represent, although we're interested in the other sectors as well. And then a third sector, though, that I think people forget about, and I'm just, this is world according to Simon stuff, and I'm doing, but is those self-made men and women who've started something, grown it, and that's now a $500 million or $1 billion business. So private wealth, if you like, and that is a very powerful, dynamic, exciting part of the New Zealand business sector. I mean, I'm thinking of Heinz piping. I don't know what the value of that is, but family business, very strong, stronger than a number of listed companies, but lots of people wouldn't have heard of it or be thinking about it. Plenty of other real economy businesses as well that are, you haven't heard of. They're not listed, but they make a big difference in New Zealand. They've maybe even gone multinational. And if I was to say, I've talked tech, and that's can be part of this, but seeing your startup tech business, the $10 million med tech business on Simon Street, I could name a few actually. We want to see that become $100 million, $200 million, $1 billion company. But then what we also want to see is some of those $500 million companies in the real economy, whether it's in agribusiness or whether it's in construction. Wouldn't it be great to see them globalise and doing more in Australia and so on? That's every bit as important, maybe more important than seeing some listed companies go well. Albeit I'd love to see the listed sector of New Zealand more dynamic and see reforms that see more businesses list on our stock exchange. But for whatever reason, we've had very little of that in recent years.
I asked about whether New Zealand is a great place to live for an average person, but what about, I kind of touched on this already, but what about, is it a good place to do business?
Yeah, look, because I don't want people to ring me up after this and say, you terrible person, you're talking about New Zealand. Hey, New Zealand is a great place to live. Look, as I say, I've just come back from Europe.
Yeah,
I mean,
to do business,
and I'll get to that. There's so much that's good about this place. It is safe. People are friendly. The food is the best in the world. I mean, there's great experience you can have actually for free, right? So I'm not talking New Zealand. I just think think, we could be even better in that regard. The business sector, the same is true. I mean, I just think our niceness, our kindness, our softness means we lack a bit of, as a gross generalisation, because there's always exceptions, we lack a bit of the oomph, the drive, but the settings are part of that. I mean, again, if you had the settings, a lower tax, lower regulatory environment, like a Singapore or people will say, well, it has some compliance, but a lot lower than New Zealand, like America. America's got its faults, but it is a much more permissive environment. You'll just get bigger, stronger businesses. So that would be my critique at a level.
What about the struggle that businesses are facing right now? What are they struggling with the most? Is it funding? Is it cash flow? Is it staffing?
I think it has been.
What's been happening? What's exactly going on?
Well, interesting, when I got out of politics and I became CEO of the Auckland Business Chamber, the number one issue back then, at the end of the then Labour government, Jacinda Prime Minister, then Chris Hipkins, if you think about that period in time, the borders had been kept closed. And even post-COVID, in the immediate aftermath, very few workers were allowed in and out. So the number 1, 2, 3, 4 issue, the big issues then was we need workers, not even skilled and talented workers. We take anyone, right? We need more workers for our business. So it wasn't then. It wasn't cash flow. It wasn't kind of demand for their products or services. It was workers. That then flipped. And the borders were opened up. You're allowed a lot more workers in. The Luxon government started. And in that period, as a generalisation, the issues have been the ones you're talking about. Look, keeping your head above water, having your revenue higher than your costs, and having some cash flow. So there's multiple issues going with that. But, with cost of living rises that have affected consumers, that's also affected businesses. As it's affected consumers, they've spent less, and so there's less demand for the businesses' products and services, right? And that's a vicious cycle rather than a virtuous cycle where, there's no money because there's no money, and then that goes round. Banks not loaning to SMEs and just need to keep business. IRD tightening up its policies so that there's more liquidations, receiverships, and so on. So it's been those hand to mouth, cash flow, revenue, cost issues. I'm optimistic, actually, not just about New Zealand, because we're a long way from problems, and it is still a beautiful country with great people, even if a few have left. But I'm also optimistic because I think cyclically, we've gone up and down. We've had a hard period. Interest rates have come down. They're now stimulatory to businesses. We see inflation going up. Maybe they'll go back up this year, and that would be, from a business perspective, negative as inflation's gone up. But generally speaking, they've come back from the highs they were at, and that's good for business and good for the economy. Added to that, for world reasons that we don't deserve credit for, but they're good for us. We've got some of the best conditions for the primary sectors, whether it's selling kiwi fruit, selling cherries, selling dairy, you name it, to make a lot of money in our agribusiness kind of area. And so that's very exciting. So you put those two things together, we can't but have a better year at one level, short of a massive kind of NVIDIA, Amazon crash or something, sending the world in. We can't but have a better year this year, I think, slowly but surely, and higher growth. So I am basically optimistic. I just come back to it. I'm like a dog with a bone, but with really good policy settings and incentives in place, it could be even better than that.
What do businesses need the most? Actually, no. The question I had for you was, what are you advising people as the CEO of the Auckland Business Chamber? What do you advise? What is your message when people come up to you and talk to you? Even as how are you playing a part in supporting businesses in 2026?
I think I think as a generalisation, I probably prefer the word support to advice. And we do
Support
do
is
some
a good word,
advice.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
just because, look,
Supporting is
it's very dependent on the sector, the character, what they should be doing in that context. I mean, the proposition for the Chamber is many things. At one level, it's leading, I shouldn't call my members horses, but horses to water, right? So it's functions, it's events, it's networking, it's getting them at opportunities, putting those before them, right? Because they're at an of do with 100 like-minded people, some of who could be their next client. Right, so there's a lot. I take that seriously, right? I think, and particularly for new migrants, right? I mean, a lot with Asian Aucklanders and other new migrant communities who are actually business savvy, but they need to get in front of people, and that's sometimes hard when you've only been here for 5 years or something. You don't have the networks you do if you're born here and you went to the right schools or whatever. So I think that's part of it. I think a lot of advocacy, right? These energy issues. I believe everything I've said to you, and I have strong views. Some people criticise me for that, but I have strong views on these. But it's also true. Our members, our SME market, agree with me as a generalisation. There'll be some that won't, but a lot that do. Industry, some industry bodies, big meat workers in plants in Auckland and other, they are pushing. So we advocate for them. I'm not just saying this energy stuff out of the goodness of my heart. It happens to be what real businesses think that are members of ours, and we push this, that advocacy, and then support and sort of advice. We run regional business partnership program that's putting not so much us advising, but putting businesses in front of proper advisors who know what they're doing and could give good advice. Thought leadership, and these are some of benefits. Finding discounts, so we have New Zealand's biggest energy broker as a partner of ours, and they're there, and you get a discount if you're a member of the Chamber to kind of see if you're getting the sharpest price on your energy, and doing other things like that with 2 degrees of telco. So they are some of the benefit propositions for the Chamber. Specific advice for businesses, as I say, that probably requires a bit more bravery or stupidity than I have, hopefully, to give that in the generic. But I think I'm big on being. I think we lack a bit of robustness in New Zealand. It's hard thinking. What are your 3 or 4 issues? Focusing on them. I think a lot of people get caught up in silly stuff that's not really going to quote Sir Peter Blake, who was one of New Zealand's greatest sailors, going to make the boat go faster. So what's going to make your boat go faster? 3 or 4 things, not 15. What are you going to do about them every day? So I think that's, in the end, I think that's true in politics, I think that's true in business. Just robust thinking. You know what? It would be nice to focus on this new market over here and this new product we could do. It might go really well, but actually I'm going to focus on getting the product we've already got better, because I know that's the main chance and that's where there's more revenue, and that's our issue right now. So I think just that robust thinking, and maybe sometimes that does require someone to sit down with you and help you go through that and put in place that plan.
Yeah, but you guys have been really busy in 2025. You've had multiple summits. Tell me about that. Tell me how that has been, how that's come out, and what are the opportunities for New Zealand businesses to make the most of it, especially with the Indian deal as well, the Indian free trade.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, heaps going on.
I still think. Where to go on this? There's so much we could say. I mean, India's a tough market. But in the end, we're going to get a free trade agreement. It's going to open doors. It's now or never, and we'll help de-risk that for businesses, right? We'll get over that.
Why did it happen now?
Well, I'm irrelevant to politics these days, so I can say these things.
I know.
I think geopolitics. I think the truth is India is at a moment where it's now really, after America and China, the next superpower. I mean, EU as a continent, but a real superpower. 1.5 billion, I think now, people. Thank God. What a huge sort of potential is there in a younger population. So, but they're at a moment where actually Trump, has been some issues there with India, and so they're looking around saying, you know what, it may not be particularly relevant to us. We're so big, we're an elephant to the small little kiwi fruit. But you know what, geopolitically, this is a country that's worth talking to. We can do this deal. We haven't been that into free trade in the past. We've been quite protectionist, but we're going to do this. And just recently with the EU, a much bigger and more consequential deal. So I think it's geopolitics for them. It's the right time and place. Right. They're increasingly a confident superpower. It wants to get out there and have these relationships. But, for them, I would think it's less about economics and, the economy than, as I say, geopolitics and the strategies around that.
How is that going to be helpful? Like the free trade deal for New Zealanders, how helpful is that?
As a generalisation, very helpful to our primary sectors. Your kiwi fruit sector, which is it's probably more than this these days. But let's say that's a 2.5 billion sector. This can be really significant for kiwi fruit, for other horticulture. But also in our technology and services areas, where we've got niches, and they've got a increasingly skilled population that can provide workers for this. I think that's significant. And then a bunch of new areas. I mean, I'm talking with some characters at the moment around movies, Bollywood. The last fancy Bollywood movie in New Zealand was I think it was the year 2000 or 2001.
Wow.
It's a long time ago, right? We're still trading off that. That went big in India, but it's been a long time between drinks. So, with this free trade agreement, with increased kind of political connection and business connection, couldn't that be win-win? More Indian films, which are big budget, fancy films getting in front of, in some cases, I presume, hundreds of millions of people, made in New Zealand. I mean, that would be amazing for tourism and so on. And so, there's an opportunity just there as just one example.
One example. But you've been through many other different summits as well, and the government has been through that as well. What has been your highlight, and that's real promising, helpful thing that's happened for 2026?
A personal highlight was a significant business delegation, about 20-25 business people to Central and Eastern Europe. It's a great part of the world. I mean, really, there were some tangible outcomes. There's businesses that set up offices in Prague, in Budapest. But for me personally, it was at a thinking level. I mean, it just it opened my eyes to a very exciting part of the world. We've got a lot of cultural similarity with, and seeing good policies that they are putting in place. This year, I think we'll do Latin America. That's going to be really cool. I think. Again, it's an area that's a bit untapped. I don't know that we're going to make lots of money out of it in the next day or... Sorry, I'll say that again. I don't think we're going to make a lot of money out of that in the next day or year, but it's got great potential. And now that we're, for parts of Asia, the quickest way there, that's a good one as well. So, look, there's plenty of opportunity. It's not without risk, but you've got to kind of get out there, and I think that's something the Chamber can help with.
When you were in government, what's one of the decisions that you made that you were still proud of and you would stand by?
Oh, plenty. I mean, I think it's like anything. I mean, I probably sound like a politician, but and I'm not anymore. But I mean, I think there's not many I'd say that was wrong. I think on the information you have, you need to make your best decision. I think basically, it's right. I think. It's self-serving, but I think, I was ahead of the times on a bunch of new energy and technology stuff, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles. They've had a lot of promise. They haven't got very far, but I think actually 2026, 27 will be the years for that. We're going to see the deployment of these at quite significant scale in the likes of China and other parts of Asia. New Zealand could have led in that, but we kind of dropped the ball. And that is what it is. I mean, one that's very topical right now is the City Rail Link. I was certainly a prime mover in that. It's it may have cost too much, but it may have taken too long. But no one's going to regret that. That will be transformative for Auckland, and it required leadership that myself, the Mayor of Auckland at the time, and a small number of others showed. I was down that recently, and it's awesome. It will really help in a transport sense, but it'll also help in a sentiment sense and an emotional sense, because you and I, when we're there and we're in that, we'll feel like we're part of a real city. It will feel like an international city, and there'll be urban development opportunities around that. So I think that's, at $5.5 billion or whatever it is that it's cost, that's, no one's going to regret that. It'll have a very transformative effect over time. It'll have its teething issues, but over time on Auckland.
What would be the one thing that you would do differently if you had the chance again? You had to be part of. I suppose we might have touched on that a little bit, but yeah, I'll let you expand onto that.
What I do, I think it's true in business and politics, and it's not so much for my time in government, when I was always on the rise, if you like, and on my way up, and in specific portfolios. I think they did the best I could, and I don't know that I changed a lot. I think as leader of the National Party in opposition, I think what is true, and again, this may sound like I'm being self-serving to myself, but it genuinely would be the thing I would change. I think you can be right too soon. I think you can be ahead of the time. And if you think about that in businesses, there are businesses that are at the cutting edge of a new technology, some kind of biomedical device or something that's going to, give people longer lives and so on. But the first one generally isn't the one that gets there, right? Actually, it goes bust and loses money and out of business. And then it's often like the fifth or sixth one, right? That wasn't the best. Copied what the other guys and girls did, but was it about the right time when the market had gone on to it? Business investors were prepared to invest, and it's the one that goes big, right? Is that fair? No, it's not fair, but that's life in the fast lane. And so I look back on my time, I think on a bunch of things. At the time, they seemed radical. I was very staunch on law and order and the problems we had. I was pretty forthright on COVID and how it had gone too long, and the overall social and economic effects of what we were doing were, in a cost-benefit sense, no longer right. We should be changing, and a raft of other areas. Stuff that today, if you heard them, you'd say, well, there's nothing in that. Everyone agrees on that, the left and the right. But at the time, they were a bit edgy. People weren't prepared to hear them, and didn't want to hear them. And actually, with more political maturity and wisdom, if you like, I would have bided my time on some of that. More and let the arguments play out more. So I would play that differently. I think there's being wise, being as I say, politically mature often means, or in business sense mature, often means taking a slower course, and letting the public or the investors get to the point that you want them to, rather than trying to force them there too quickly.
Because everyone gets fascinated when you look from the outside in, when you're in government, and you as your CEO now you're different. And I was going to ask you about how different is it to lead a company or an organization rather versus leading the country. Something that people don't understand about how government's decisions are being made. What's I think I do get annoyed with business leaders who sit there and think that's so easy. If I was there, I would do this. They have literally no idea, because let me tell you, public-facing roles like government have 17 more issues and complexity than business, right? It's not to say there are some complex businesses, and I'm not downplaying the very important role business plays, both individually and in aggregate. But I mean, one way to say it doesn't even do it justice is business is a forest. Some days you can't see very much. The light doesn't get through. Difficult decisions, but the trees are long and straight, and you walk through. Politics and those more public-facing, non-business type roles. For example, being CEO of Rugby New Zealand, which, by the way, they can't get a CEO at the moment.
they are jungles, right? They're not a forest; they're a jungle. There's weeds, there's things that will trip you up. You not only can you not see because the light can't get through, but it's just there's foliage and bush and snakes everywhere, right? So it is a much more complicated. You know, if you take the rugby union for example, right at the moment as we talk, they haven't got a boss of the rugby union, they haven't got a coach, and actually that's true across a bunch of sporting codes. These are harder jobs in many regards, and less well remunerated, of course, than running some of our biggest listed companies, because you don't just have to balance the books and make some money, which I'm not downplaying again. I think they're really important, noble roles, right? They make a society better in aggregate. But you also have, stakeholders, local rugby unions, the mum on the street who wants her kid to be an All Black, players' unions with egos, and sometimes it's the hardest people to deal with, the ones who aren't being paid, right? Because they're not going to just do what you say because you pay them more. They do it because they believe it or not, and so politics is like that, government is like that as well. And then you add in the media, and then you add in all these other complexities. So they're very, very different. I suppose, look, at one level, leadership is leadership. And coming back to what I said about just being robust and clear-eyed, here's the three of, I've really thought about it. I've weighed it all up, and here are the 3 or 4 things after I've listened to people we're going to focus on. That's true I think in business and in politics and in, say, sports or these other non-government roles. You
must be very proud to be leading one of the oldest business chamber organisation for businesses, and you've just celebrated the 170th birthday.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, fantastic. No, it's a lot of fun. Life is great. I really, I feel very blessed, really, to have, interesting work, changes every day that I can make what I want of. I've possibly just been a bit mean about business, and well, that's easy in comparison. It's not easy. And actually, I think what's true, I feel blessed because in my role, it probably doesn't require the discipline that leading a significant company does. Because I think with that, it's day in, day out, making sure the various things that make that widget or that product or other product or service are all tracking right. That's a lot of discipline. Whereas I find, with my role, it's just fun. Actually, every day, what am I into? Today I'm talking to you. It's fantastic. This afternoon we've got a Vietnamese New Zealand business council that we're inaugurating. We're starting, and that's going to be hugely interesting and I think exciting sort of development and with between New Zealand and a really high growth economy. Tomorrow will be 4 other completely different things. So yeah, I feel very lucky as opposed to, leading that company where it's probably actually, I'm sure, interesting and satisfying, but really hard work.
Do you feel like what could be done? Well, actually, no, that's not the question. Do you feel like you can get more done now than when you were a minister?
Yes and no. I do think you can achieve a lot in business. And outside of politics, it's no doubt about that. And so, possibly I would have thought 5-10 years ago, politics is the be all and end all. It's where change happens.
Yeah.
I don't think that anymore. So I think that has changed. But it is true in politics, you do, in your areas, if you're effective, have significant power and ability to shape a sector albeit a relatively small, but in an entire economy, and that's a great privilege. Because
what's been the toughest point of your life as a minister or as a leader, or I mean, you've had. I don't know if you've started a business yourself.
I have. Admittedly, with people who know much more than me and are much better than me, but I'm a significant shareholder in a pet food group of companies, and actually in some other primary sector companies as well. But I'd be very modest about that and my skills relative to theirs.
To the big guns.
And what we're doing. But, so I would today consider myself, if I can say this, a real business person. I every day is business, and both, not every day, but my own personal business interests, leading as a board member or independent director, companies, and then the chamber, which is talking with us. I think, look, I'm a genuine business person, but, I'm on a journey, and there's a lot more to learn. And the hardest stuff for me personally has probably been in leadership. Probably you're coming in after John Key and Bill English, very significant leaders leading, at that point in time, New Zealand's biggest political party, the New Zealand National Party, at a time when, we're in opposition, we have to regroup, there's a lot of egos, a lot of members of parliament, and a lot of jockeying. And as I say, that complexity is complication more than complexity, is, certainly a very testing period, albeit, I wouldn't change anything. I look back on it with weird as some might think, with fondness, as a great time of life, and a difficult time.
When you do have those difficult moments, what do you rely on to stay positive, or stay true to yourself, or keep on your values? What do you tap into?
I think today more than ever, it's a sense of perspective. Look, what do they say? It's a bit of a cheesy cliche, isn't it? But sweat the big stuff in the end, and don't sweat the small stuff. And in the end, it's all small stuff. And at a level, that's true. Possibly if you're president of America or China or something like that, that's not true. You've got the finger near nuclear buttons and these things. But look, in this country, no one, and in my world today, no one's fundamentally going to die. Nothing's going to, and so I think that sense of perspective and family, and in the end, I'm better than I'm not perfect. I've always been a workaholic, but I think I'm better today than I was at, making sure, after work we're going for a walk, or we're, watching a movie, or whatever it is we're doing to enjoy good family time. I think that stuff's very important.
Because your family life is important to you?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, in the end, it's a quote from William Morris. I don't know if you know him. He's, he's a great artist, and he did all those sort of paisley wallpapers, 19th century Britain. But, he said something like, in the end, love and work, these two things only. Something like that. I butchered it probably, but and I think that's probably right.
The gist of it, I think, yeah.
If I think about my life, what are the things that, I like work. Get a lot of satisfaction from that and enjoyment, and then in the end it's family. They probably the things that are the prime motivators for me.
What drives you the most? What makes you want to be good, want to be successful, want to be hardworking? What's really, or is it?
It's very complicated, isn't it? I wish I could give you a good, strong answer to that, but I think it's. Some of it will be, I think in the end, ego is valid. I mean, it's in a sense, I want to be significant. I want to do something that matters, that people look and say, yeah, he did something good there. So there's definitely that. But I think what is also true is, in the end, I'm an intrinsically, and maybe we all are, but I think, some people want a simple, non-complicated life. I have a character flaw for curiosity and interest. And if I can make something interesting by, adding on a responsibility or pushing into an area that may be hard, but is going to be very stimulating to me and a challenge, I will tend to do that. So I think those two things, ambition, if you want to put it that way, it's a dirty word for a lot of New Zealanders, but it shouldn't be. And curiosity or stimulation, the desire to keep things interesting, mean that, for me, I keep life very busy.
What is the Goliath that you're facing at the moment?
Oh, that's a really good question. There's one or two, but I don't think I can tell you. There's always something. I mean, Goliaths perhaps the wrong way to describe what I'll talk to you about, because I think with the Goliath, that's a baddie who you want to kill, right? And I don't know that I've got a big baddie in my life in a professional sense that I need to get with a stone and see fall to the ground. I do think there are these big issues, though. I mean, one of them is, I mentioned to you, a group of pet food companies that I'm a significant shareholder in, and one is an export business, one is and the other two are in certain areas for the domestic New Zealand market and supermarkets. And look, I think they are at a level. They're a Goliath. They are small businesses now, but my business partners and I can see this could be a really fantastic, high growth set of businesses, really fulfilling some needs both in New Zealand and abroad. And so I'm very focused on that. And that's a new adventure for me. As you say, I'm not traditionally been a business person. I'm a lawyer turned politician turned business guy now. So that's a new journey. But we every day we're doing something. I mean, in the last day or two, in addition to working full time and some governance responsibilities, my job for this business has been sourcing goat meat. And when we need a lot. We need like a couple of tons of goat meat a month.
So you have to go and get the meat yourself? Or?
Well, I need to find someone who can get me the goat meat. And the truth of that is, for a bunch of reasons, I may be wrong on this, no one quote me on, but my sense is the Department of Conservation has had a big culling program. So there are fewer goats out there than there used to be. There's much more demand for goat meat in New Zealand. Personally, I'm not into goat meat. I didn't grow up with it. There's 5 other meats I'd have before I would eat goat meat. But, we have these significant, exciting Indian communities, Pakistani communities, other Asian communities in New Zealand now who love goat and want them in their curries and so on. So the price of goat and the demand for goat has probably never been high. You put all that together and it's hard to get goat meat. And so I'm just saying to you, that's a practical issue. I think I've certainly got some connections now who can supply, and we need a certain kind of goat meat for mincing into our products. And so that's not a Goliath, but that's a mini issue within the Goliath of kind of growing this business.
And what does the next 5 to 10 years look like for New Zealand? Are you optimistic? Are you worried? I know that we might have touched on this, but
gosh, you're asking really small questions of me. That's I appreciate it. I think the next 5 to 10 years has a capacity to be very strong. I don't think it'll be a terrible 5 or 10 years. I think it can be, as I say, very strong. My reasons for optimism are fundamentally, one, the global environment deteriorating in a bunch of regards, becoming harder, meaner, tougher, which I think plays relatively to New Zealand, given our remoteness. We're a first world, nice little country with rule of law and decent people, skilled workforce. It can play very well for us. So that makes me optimistic. I think the economy has been tough. It is cyclically, as I say, on the basis of monetary policy, 5 or 6 other things we won't bore you with. That's going to be better. So that all makes me pretty optimistic for New Zealand. Actually, with government and business, there's plenty that could make that better. But to the extent that we've made wrong choices, or we haven't done things as well as we could, that all means we can get it right. We can make right choices that make New Zealand very strong.
What's giving you the most hope right now for New Zealand's future? Gosh, these are really I don't know if this is going to play back well when people listen to it. I don't know if I've got amazing answers. What gives me the most hope? I think in the end it's just it's a lovely little country that
that, has decent people, has great natural advantages. It's in a very safe sort of, as I say, part of the world. Fundamentally, nowhere's entirely safe, but so I think it's that kind of people in place thing. That's I think more than ever in our history got the capacity to play very well for us.
Any final words for people listening who want to hear a thing or two from you? Final words.
I think. Look, just we say join the Chamber of Commerce or 7. No. I think
give it a plug. Give it a plug.
No, I think it would be. You know what? If you're there in business and tough, I recognise that. We do a lot of businesses. There'll be better days, and I think what I would encourage businesses to do is really sit there, think about where things are going. Don't try and boil the ocean, I think is the phrase. Don't try and do everything. Don't go too big. Think about what are the 3 or 4 things you're going to focus on every day to really get your business going better. I think if you do that, you've got not only real hope, you've got a very credible prospect of doing those things and making a real success of it, and chunking them off one at a time. Look, we're not going to, in my pet food business, solve the 17 things we could. We talked at a strategy day recently about whether we should be launching new products and doing this. No, we're going to focus on the few things. And actually, one of those, therefore, was to make of our 3 or 4 goals, one of the goals happen, or we need the goat meat. Right, and I can chunk that off, and I reckon we'll have goat meat in place, a couple of tons a month, very shortly. So I think robust thinking about the future. What are the 3 or 4 things you're going to do? Get up every day and try and make those happen. If you do that, look, I think you look back at the end of 2026 and say, you know what, actually, that worked for me. I'm in a better place today than I was at the start of 2026. So I hope that's maybe, I don't know if that's a bit eric, but I hope that's something that maybe if you were listening and you got to the end of this, well done.
Yeah, good job.
Maybe you can take something from that.
I do have, I just want to know if you, how can people reach out if they want to connect with you or they want to know more about the Business Chamber?
Look, love to see people reach out, thrive on the connection. I think there's very simple ways. Actually, increasingly, people contact me on LinkedIn, and I think there's a good way to do it. I'm not always, going to get back to you in the first day or sometimes even week, but generally I get back, and I appreciate that. Obviously through the chamber, that's another way to do that. But I think pretty accessible, and always keen to hear from business people around what they're doing, what they want to see. That's that knowledge, that intel, that perspective is great power and sustenance to me.
Simon, I think you are leaving a massive legacy in New Zealand, and you having contributed a lot to New Zealand and the country. And thank you for the service that you've done and the work that you're doing with the chamber. And I'm sure there's more good times to come. And yeah, I wish you all the best.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Really appreciate it.